Myself. Now, let's welcome Professor Li Zheng to address the event. Welcome.
Dear guests, teachers, students, and all the friends, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It is a great honor to be invited send from around here. University event.
Good evening, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. And also for the online students and the friends, we are very happy. So the first I will introduce is that the object of document is document or validation platform object the environment is in it that they could leading clear air, creating good jobs, and also promote the economy development. So you can see from maybe Beijing, maybe Chinese practice, Beijing is more blue, and also we use more new energy automobiles. So actually we already see the good environment and also the consumption of the traditional energy already reduced very frequently. And if you check that what is the most important part, if you consider next scope of climate change, so you will see that we need to urge everybody to ensure that our work during the session can truly contribute to supporting SDGs implementation and enhance ambition and hence to meeting the objective of the Climate Change Convention, Kyoto Protocol, and also Paris Agreement. So urge. You know, in UN system, when they have their resolution, they use different words. Encourage. Urge is very, very strong wording. It means we need to quickly, immediately take action. And also, you can see from their document, one of the document prepared by the subsidiary body of scientific and technical advice. You will see the climate change is failing by the people. They are very vulnerable, and especially by some very poor countries. So we need to take action. It's not stop, not waiting right now, to working together towards a net zero of carbon dioxide. Of course, not only carbon dioxide, but also have some other greenhouse gases. It's also very important. Even some of them is 100 times larger influence compared with carbon dioxide. So the 1.5 degree, this our target with this in this century, the end of this century, it's not so easy to achieve. We need to take action right now. And also, you will see that for the climate change, the window is very quickly is approaching to close. It means that we are feeling that the time is so short. We cannot wait. We must work together in Glasgow, in UK. So that's why all the countries, even we facing the problem of COVID-19, but many delegate members move to Glasgow for the conference. So this is a challengeable, of course the conference is challengeable, but all the countries, they are thinking is important. Even they forgot their dangerous for the traveling process. So the GAUC conference for the climate change, I think is a very good opportunity. We hope following the opening session, the high-level session will be held. Maybe the president of the countries, the minister of the countries will have more announcement to say, we want to have more contribution to curb climate change. This is possible from the last of the COPs of the Conference of Parties. So we know that many countries, they already have their willingness to do more compared with before. So of course, willingness is one part, but we still have challenge. You can have the feelings that, such as here, we can see we're still facing the flue gas and the carbon dioxide is generated by the power plant, traditional power plant. And also for the Antarctic pole, the ice cover is disappear. Some of them is disappear, or is much more influence even the North Pole or South Pole. So you will see that is still the challenge. We are not really change this direction. And also many of the places, the land is dry. We have flood many cities, including the cities in China, in many other countries. The wildfire, even in the United States, in Australia. So we can have many, many examples, these disasters caused by climate change. We cannot say some place maybe is better, but even is better, probably is dangerous because they have unbalance compared with before. So if it's bad, of course, this is for us is very, very difficult to accept this situation. So that is, we have a common understanding. We're facing the challenge. We already know that 1.5, the increase, is our target. This already know by 15 years ago from the IPCC report. And of course, you can say, how about a larger increase for the temperature? If it's larger. The World Bank's report already say, we cannot accept if it's about 4 degree increase of the temperature or air. So it's a disaster. So this is our requirement based on the scientific report. This is our bottom line. We cannot above that. How to dealing with this? Of course, we have many choices, but this one should be together with what the problem it is. We also know that the landfill gas, everybody produce municipal solid waste. The landfill gas is generated in the landfill sites. And this is a very large number and big influence. And of course, if open burning for the household waste, for the garbage, what will happen? Of course, will produce carbon dioxide. Or if landfill them, they will produce methane gas. So this is all of them is a greenhouse gas. And also we waste a lot of resources. But why resources is related to climate change? Do you understand what it means? When you have your resources, you need to develop them in the faraway place, in the countryside, in the other countries, and you need to transport them to the manufacturer, the processing company, long-distance transportation. Of course, transportation needs energy. So one of the reports issued by United Nations Environment Program, they called Global Resource Outlook. Above half of the greenhouse gas is generated, is contribute to the total greenhouse gas. So it's big. Of course, this is not only the transportation, but also including the processing. So it really is a big issue for resources. So, but if we are not properly to recycle these recyclables, this waste, what will happen? We need more resources from the underground. So of course, it will generate much more greenhouse gas. So, of course, if we consider resources, not only climate change, but also pollution, they produce a lot of solid waste. So if you develop 1 ton of resources, probably you have 10 tons of solid waste generated, and also influence biodiversity. So these together remind us how to dealing our resources. So the global trade, what is global trade? It is all the countries already know this, already take action for that. So I'm very happy to say that before this March, we already have 128 countries. They already have their own carbon neutral policy target. And not only these countries' government, but also for cities, for 84 cities, already have their target. And also, many big companies, they already have their company-level policy for carbon neutral. So if you see recently, many people want to have an interview with a professor in Tsinghua University because they need technical support for supporting them for carbon neutral. So of course, this is a chance. But the most important, I think, is the companies right now is very actively to involved for climate change. So what is the action? So the challenge is there. What is the action? Of course, we can say that China already, from the government level, we already have action. Because very early that President Xi Jinping in 2015 proposed that we will have our policy to carbon peak is 2030 or carbon neutral 2060. Of course, I'm sure that in China we will have much ambitious target. Maybe we could even much quickly to achieve this target. I'm sure that because all the different level, from the government level, from the company level, from the university already act on that. And this is already recognized by not only by our country, but also appreciated by the ambassador of climate change in UK, is Mr. John Morton, and also the president of EU, von der Leyen. So you will see that they appreciate Chinese contribution, commitment for carbon neutral. And also, recently you will see China already have the policy we call 1+M policy. So it covers the energy, covers the industry level, and the transportation system, and the resource efficiency, circular economy with the recycling, and also for the financing. And very, very good is we have a concept is implement nature-based solution. So I think maybe you can find this in some other international platform. They use this nature-based solution is quite well. I think East China already combined all these approaches together, become one of the approach promoting China towards the carbon neutral and carbon peak. So achieving this, of course, we need to change our mind. Actually, many people already changed their mind because previously we know that we have much more coal, we have less oil or gas. But now it doesn't matter because we have many of regenerated energies is not used, such as solar, such as hydrology, such as wind. So we can use them. So you can see recently many provinces, they are already thinking regenerable energy as a province strategy, especially such as Tsinghua province. So this is a very good direction. And it's not only by one of them, by a group, many of the provinces towards this direction. So, of course, if you think this is only to say energy or transportation or reduce the consumption of the energy, but actually the climate change issue could synergy with some other issues, with many other industry or sectors. Recently, if you see Chinese Ministry of Ecology and the Environment, they propose that synergy effect of pollution reduction and carbon reduction. They already combine this idea in their 14th five-year plan for environment, ecology and the environment. So you can see that we can do more, not only focus carbon dioxide itself, energy itself, but also synergy with some other sectors. Okay, so this is something else, not directly related to you. Of course, I already feeling about that because I'm working. I have a link with the industry. But how about we can do from the university students, from the people, or from the people working in the office? So here, I just show you some pictures. The first thing you know that is shared bicycle. This is quite a new idea, not so long time, but I think it's a good idea. Compare with each one buy one of the bicycle. Because it will occupy more resources. Now we can reduce the resource consumption. And the most important, you are not to have a taxi. Short distance, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, you can directly to use bicycle. Of course, it will reduce the carbon dioxide. This we can do. We can use this idea to some other countries. If you see the 5th session of United Nations Environment Assembly in Nairobi, Chinese, one of the companies, they already donate shared bicycle to that campus. And all the member states of UN, they have a feeling, what is the shared bicycles? How to use bicycles instead of the cars in a short distance. Of course, this is a talent, but I think more and more people could use. And second one, maybe you know, air conditioner is use energy. If you use them less, or you set the temperature not 25 degrees instead of 26, 27, for you is acceptable, the energy will saved. That's quite useful for curbing climate change. Of course, this is very easy, or if you use less of them. And also here, I also have a picture for the packaging material. So, I'm sure that every year you have more than 10, maybe 20, 30 of packaging, express packaging. Buy something, use this. But how about this packaging, the direction? If they are in the municipal solid waste, it will be burned, of course, produce carbon dioxide. Even in China, we have a good solution. We recover energy to produce electricity, but the efficiency not 500%. We still lost a lot of energy during the incineration of municipal solid waste. But if we use as raw material, we can recycle them. That's quite different. Because as I already said, if you develop the resources from the underground, it will also consume a lot of energy. The processing consumes energy also. So I think from us, it's quite easy to recycle this packaging material. And finally, what it means is a photovoltaic. So this means although it's not say it's a very advanced technology, we already have many years. And you will see in Qinghai or in Hebei province, many places, they use solar panel, very, very popular. But we still need to improve the efficiency, to reduce the price. So this need the students to contribute for them. So you need research on that to contribute to that. Also can contribute to fighting the climate change. Of course, as well as this, you can also working for recycling this material and make a circle, make the loop circle towards a sustainable development. So at last, I would like to say we need contribute through our knowledge, through our work to climate change. So finally, I'm very happy. Thank you very much for staying with me and also climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Li, for this uplifting speech. And as Professor Li has said, The climate has no borders, and of course, we need to act together, work together, not only the scientists, professors, but also all the young people all over the world. And now, we'll proceed to the roundtable discussion. Youth representatives, please feel free to share your thoughts with us on this stage. And the first speaker of our today is Chen Nyang. Let's welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chen Nyang. I'm a student from the School of Environment, Tsinghua University. So today I want to share something with you about the low-carbon transition in China's iron and steel industry. So we are all aware of the carbon peaking and carbon neutrality targets proposed by President Xi last year. The carbon emissions of China's iron and steel industry accounts for 15% of China's total emissions. So this industry really needs deep emission reduction. In response to the urgent action demand in the upcoming decade, the China's iron and steel industry will have to eliminate its excess capacity and upgrade the traditional blast furnaces and converters into the newly constructed electric arc furnaces. However, eliminating these carbon-intensive facilities will also come with a series of multi-dimensional impacts. For example, the economics, the carbon emissions, the water resources, and the health impacts. So when the iron and steel industry is destined to cut emissions deeply, the main questions turns into how to transition in the best way instead of whether or not to transition. So it is very necessary to incorporate all of these factors into the designing of the transition roadmap of iron and steel industry. So based on the micro database, including facility level data on technical characteristics, the environmental impact, and health impact, we evaluated the performance of more than 900 steel production facilities in China, which cover more than 1 billion tons of steel output. We found that the evaluation outcome is very different across regions and facilities. And using the performance ranking as the key decision criteria, we proposed a plant-by-plant transition roadmap through 2050 to identify the facilities to be decommissioned, upgraded, or newly constructed in the future. And we also found that the strategy proposed in this study will have the highest carbon, water, and health benefits among all the traditional transition strategies compared in this study. So we believe that the policies related to the low-carbon transition of China's iron and steel industry can be improved in the following aspects: controlling the addition of backward production capacity, promotion the development of circular economy, and strengthening the R&D and innovation of the zero-carbon technologies. But above all, the most important thing we think is that to put the multi-dimensional impact assessment at the core position of the policymaking process. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your insights and thoughts on this topic with us. And our next speaker is Sun Ruoshui. Let's welcome.
Hello everyone, I'm Sun Ruoshui from the School of Environment, Tsinghua University, and my topic today is the assessment of environment effect of biomass power plant and CCS based on an MFA-LCA hybrid model. Electricity and heat generation emits 51% of the carbon dioxide in China 2018. Bioenergy and carbon capture and storage, or BECCS, is the only foreseeable negative emission technology by now. Plant, or straw to be more exact, absorbs carbon dioxide in the air by the photosynthesis. Then it is combusted to generate electricity, where CO2 emissions are captured and stored. Therefore, BECCS is of irreplaceable significance to achieve carbon neutrality, and my research tried to answer two questions. Is BECCS really climate friendly, and how to manage it to be climate friendly? Material flow analysis and life cycle analysis are combined as a hybrid model to trace the direct and indirect environment footprint among different stocks, and the system boundaries are listed in the figure. Several key findings are here. But for every 1 megawatt-hour electricity supplied by the BECS, first, 1,246 kilograms of carbon is pumped back from air, of which 40% is to the lithosphere. Second, 109 kilograms of carbon is embedded, of which 90 kilograms of carbon is embedded in energy consumption. Third, direct combustion of the biomass is the biggest emitter, of course. However, the plant use electricity consumption, urea production, and the planting energy consumption are also unneglected. Lastly, if we focus on other elements, we may find 46 kilograms of nitrogen leakage as planting, and 30 kilograms and 139 kilograms of phosphorus and potassium leakage at the end of life. Based on the results, several conclusions and implications can be proposed. Firstly, BECS is negative emission technology, despite the doubts cast upon its huge embedded energy consumption. However, by sensitive analysis, its efficiency should be improved for better environment performance via plant use rate and straw use rate decrease. Secondly, urea production and planting are potential process to further mitigate BECS emission. Lastly, due to the planting process and fertilizer usage, pollutions of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium should be regulated more strictly, as it is not an issue in the traditional coal-fired plant. Technology is the driver to combat climate change. In the coming carbon-neutral era, so many new technological concepts will be emerging, posing challenges for the policymaker to assess, opt, and manage. And I firmly believe that we should stand on a solid foundation of data rather than concept to choose the pathway that we should really follow, and let data speak louder than words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let data speak louder than words. Thank you for this inspiring speech. And now we'll have Xu Jiaxin to speak. Let's welcome.
So, hello everyone, my name is Xu Jiaxin, an undergraduate from Tsinghua University. And today I'd like to introduce an enterprise-centered carbon-neutral policy, which is based on the power of consumers and investors. Okay, we all know that climate change has become one of the most urgent global issues and lead to concern all over the world. To deal with climate change, there has been quantities of climate action, such as IPCC and Paris Agreement. According to IPCC report, if the temperature rises by 2.5 centigrade, all regions of the world will suffer adverse effects, and if 4 centigrade, there will be irreversible damage to global ecosystem. However, the existing policies is not enough, and there is still a huge gap compared to our target. So I'd like to make some policy suggestions. The policy is to fully mobilize the strength of enterprises with the incentive provided by consumers and investors. So first, the companies as a subject disclose their carbon emission, and this becomes an evaluation indicator. Consumers and investors can then refer to this indicator for relevant decision-making. And this can then function as incentive for companies to reduce carbon emission and also make requirements for their suppliers. Carbon trading will also be involved in this system to provide buffer space and more incentive. So I'd like to talk about the innovation and the feasibility of the policy. So first, the innovation. We can see that the policy can link emission reduction with economic benefits. It can also provide mutual supervision, broad participation of the whole society, and new incentives from carbon trading. And then I like to talk about the feasibility. Because nowadays, more and more companies realize the importance of reducing carbon emission. And we can see that more than 80% of the consumers and investors do have the preference to low-carbon products. And also, companies such as Huawei, Starbucks now do have the potential and technology advancement under carbon trading. So we do hope we can achieve carbon neutral through our combined efforts. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. And our next speaker is Huo Jingwen. Let's welcome.
Hello everyone, my name is Huo Jingwen, and it's a great honor for me to introduce my research. I would like to show you the emission counting about international service trade. The service trade has been growing rapidly, and we can see that the goods export had increased at 1%, but the commercial service export has expanded at 3%. The service trade had contributed over 20% to the world trade in 2019. And more specifically, the share of the service trade by the developed countries has increased by more than 10%. But the service industries has been always considered green, because for the almost service, there's no emissions have been produced directly. But if we look through the whole supply chain, you will notice that the upstream will produce a lot of emissions for service. For example, if you want to travel to a place, you have to take transportation, such as a bus, which will produce emissions, and the hotel you live in, the food you eat, will also produce emissions. So we have to track the change of the emission embodied in service trade. And generally, the trade volume has experienced a rapid growth at 4.7% per year, and emissions have increased by 3.5%. And we can find that the major accelerator for emission increasement is the trade volume, and the decline of emission intensity is the main decelerator. But for the developed countries, such as Vietnam and Thailand, the emission intensity is still a very important driving force for emission growth. So we put more focus on the developed countries and find that there are three main trade patterns for the growing service trade. In pattern 1, the global south has a closer trade relationship with global north, like Peru and Ethiopia. And in pattern 2, the developed countries import more service from other developed countries, but export more service from developed countries, like Philippines and Vietnam. And in third pattern, the focus is mostly on South Korea, like China and Mongolia. So we put forward several specific policy strategies for reducing emissions embodied in service trade. For example, we have to design the mitigation policies based on the whole supply chain, as I mentioned before, and stressing the regional cooperation, like China's One Belt, One Road policy, and we have also to develop digital economy. The climate change is the major challenge we are currently facing and requires joint efforts of all the countries in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us a refreshing perspective of policy and trade. And now we'll invite our next speaker, which is Zhang Zhenye, to give us a speech. Welcome.
Hello everyone, I'm Zhang Zhenye from Tsinghua University. The title of my presentation today is Systematic Investigation of China's Carbon Emissions with Driving Force Model, Historical and Future Trends. To start with, I'd like to briefly introduce the background. As we know, carbon emissions have attracted attention globally as the main contributor of global warming. And as the largest carbon-emitting country, China has committed to peak our carbon emissions before 2030 and reach carbon neutrality before 2060. However, with rapid economic development and high demand of fossil consumption, these commitments remain a big challenge for China. In addition, the influencing factors of our carbon emissions are complicated. Therefore, relevant research is necessary. In our research, first, various factors are analyzed according to the source of carbon emissions. Then our driving force model is established combining MLR and PCA. Afterwards, the future trends of China's carbon emissions was projected in 3 different scenarios, and finally, policy recommendations are proposed. Our calculation procedure and calculation results are shown in the slide, which confirm the accuracy of our model, and all the contributions of all indicators are shown in the slide. They are different. Using this driving force model, we projected China's future carbon emissions in 3 different scenarios. As we can see in scenario 1, if all indicators develop linearly over time, China's carbon emissions will keep increasing and cannot peak by the committed time. And in scenario 2, if all indicators develop inconsistent with present plan, and we can see China's carbon emissions will peak around 2024, which overcompletes our commitment. And in scenario 3, if certain technology breakthrough occurs, China's carbon emissions will peak even earlier by 2022 and reach even smaller amount. Based on formal analysis, our study recommends to reform heavy industries, not to reduce but to reform, and increase energy efficiency, improve energy structure, and encourage fossil utilization as materials instead of fossil combustion. In addition, China should insist on firm implement of ecological policy and high attention to technology development. That's all for my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And next we'll have today's last offline speaker of this conference. Let's welcome Chen Nyang.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chen Nyang. I am a PhD student from Tsinghua University. Today, I'm delighted to show my latest research about global cement industry. Cement industry is one of the most emission-intensive sector, and the rapid growth of the cement demand globally makes the issue more concerning. And most of the future cement growth is expected to happen in the emerging economies, such as Southeast Asia and Africa, due to the expanding infrastructure needs. Therefore, our research wants to review the future emission growth in the emerging economies. Firstly, we established a global plant-level cement database. The figure on the left shows the spatial distribution of global cement emissions in 2018. Each point represents the cement plants, with the color referring to the launch year. This figure helps illustrate the shift of the main contributors to the global cement emissions. For instance, in the US, the most of existing cement plants are in red color, which are built before 1970. Whereas in China, most of existing cement plants were built after 2000 with green color. We then use scenario analysis to project the future cement emissions from emerging economies. According to our results, although emerging economies will experience a rapid growth of cement emissions, the low-carbon measures can reduce emissions substantially. However, it should be noticed that in African countries like Tanzania and Nigeria, the annual cement emissions will grow fast, and the additional emissions brought by high-intensity construction cannot be offset, even if the extremely low-carbon measures are adopted. When we discuss the cement emissions with climate target, we find that without low-carbon measures, there's no way to achieve the 1.5 degree centigrade climate target of the cement industry for the emerging economies. As African countries are dominating the future cement emissions growth, higher income nations should provide economic and technological support to African countries to promote the carbonization of the emerging economies. That's all for my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Danyang, for sharing your thoughts with us. And in today's conference, we actually have some online representatives. And now we invite those online representatives to share their thoughts and ideas with us. And our first online speaker will be Michael Tanner. Let's welcome.
Hi, everyone. A pleasure to see you here. I don't know if you can see my screen. Well, thanks again.
Yes, we
happy
can
to be
hear
here.
your
Hello from
voice, but
Hamburg.
we need
I'll be
some time
presenting
to.
some joint work with Leonie Ratzke
Michael
on
can hear
deforestation
me.
and property rights and evaluation of land titling to local and indigenous communities in Ecuador. So deforestation is a matter of global present concern, especially driven by the loss of key ecosystem services, but also increasing global emissions. And of course, this has meant the loss of many unique ecosystems. A lot of it's been concentrated, though, the work on the Amazon forest, but here we're going to be looking at mangroves. Mangroves are ecosystems that grow where the water meets the land, basically the ocean meets the land, which means that they interact with high densities of human populations, but also provide key ecosystem services such as provisioning of fisheries, coastal adaptation, using the ecosystem itself, but they're also quite good at mitigating climate change, being the most efficient ecosystem in storing carbon in a physical form. But the rates of deforestation are actually higher than any other ecosystem, mostly driven by agriculture and urbanization. So basically, command and control approaches have failed in preserving these ecosystems. So we are evaluating the granting of property rights to indigenous peoples and local communities to both reach environmental and development goals. Basically, this also is motivated by the fact that the granting of property rights addresses human rights issues concerning expropriation and encroachment. And theoretically, the effects of property rights and deforestation aren't particularly clear. So our contribution is basically to do a causal evaluation of the policy of granting property rights to stop mangrove deforestation. And we also investigate the possible drivers behind its success or failure. We have two hypotheses derived from a small microeconometric model. Basically, the first one is that the acquisition of property rights by local communities reduces deforestation. And the second one is that NGO involvement actually increases the probability of property rights acquisition by reducing transaction costs. We employ a dual identification strategy. For our first hypothesis, we use an instrumental variable approach that basically uses the exogenous predictors of policy adoption, basically soil type. And for the second one, we exploit a regression discontinuity design that exploits the funding for these NGOs, basically USAID and the Congress of the United States and its liberal or non-liberal sort of makeup. And we basically find, as a result, the property rights have a causal effect on reducing deforestation. We also find that the presence of common pool resources such as fisheries provide clear incentives for indigenous peoples and ancestral communities to enroll in this costly property rights-based policy, which has positive implications for development and food security. And we also find that the policy has high transaction costs, but the role of NGOs reduces these transaction costs and actually increases policy adoption, which has important implications for aid and donor behavior. So thank you very much for this. Happy to take some further questions in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for your speech and sharing of ideas. And now we'll invite Chen Nyang, someone who also can't make it here, to deliver his speech. Let's welcome.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello, everyone. I will report the economic and technological support from the United Nations focused on developing countries tackle climate change. I'm Chen Nyang from University of Oxford, and let me introduce my partner. She's Wang Xiaolan. She's from University of Melbourne, Department of Environment. First, I will introduce the background. It's also the point why we choose this topic. According to the figure, from 1850 to 1950, United States and Europe are the vast majority contribution to the carbon dioxide emissions during the past 100 years. At the same time, almost all the developing countries didn't have any carbon emission. From 1950 until now, though developing countries except China, carbon emissions is increasing. However, per capita carbon dioxide emissions still much lower than United States and Europe. Regarding climate change is a huge problem that requires global cooperation. But for most countries, this is not the priority. Under the present dilemma, including all the negative effects because of carbon dioxide emissions, developed countries and maybe China should take the vast majority responsibility. Therefore, we come up with developed countries provide aid to the developing countries in funding and technology for carbon dioxide emissions reduction as obligation. Besides, relax restrictions and country as understanding manner. So above all, this thesis comes up with policies and suggestions to discuss the balance between developed countries' support and developing countries, including three waves: government, business, and customer. So from the government view, carbon tax on externalities and cap and trade, the carbon tax is one form of people-weighing tax. If only developed countries impose a carbon tax, there's a risk of carbon leakage. Another way is to set a sense of marginal abatement costs in the most cost-effective way is through cap and trade. And from the business business opinion, they need social and environmental responsibility. Reasonable companies should use their company's power and resource wisely. It can improve the company's corporate image. The last one is ourselves. Generally, it's customers. Well, customers can change their consumption behaviors. Sustainable consumption can minimize the environmental impacts by consuming green products, such as organic products and the recycling products. Yeah, that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Li Yuan, for sharing your ideas with us. And our next online speaker will be Liu Huiwen. Huiwen, can you hear us? So you're just delivering a speech here? Speech now.
Oh, I'm sorry, there's something wrong with my
Okay. Now
screen share.
now we can hear
Maybe
you. Now we can hear you.
I can just switch to the next one.
Do you still need some more time to prepare for your speech, where it's about the technical problems?
There's something wrong with my screen share.
Okay, so you need more time,
Can you please, maybe can you please just, yes.
Okay.
Broadcast my PowerPoint.
Or just ask our technical staff here. Can you help her to adjust the screen, to post her screen and PPTs on our screen here? Okay, so we'll just skip this speaker and we'll welcome her back after hearing Cui Can's speech. And now we'll proceed to Cui Can to invite her to give her speech now. I think due to the technical problems here, we'll just wait for a few minutes for Cui Can. Are you ready? Can you hear us?
Sorry about that. Hello? everyone, I'm Tansy from Tsinghua University, and I'd like to share my research that is global mitigation efforts cannot neglect emerging emitters. So why do we care about emerging emitters? Historically, climate change mitigation focused on the reducing carbon dioxide emissions, but mainly from the large emitters, such as the United States, China, and India. However, from 2010 to 2018, other 59 countries showed a faster growing carbon dioxide emissions than the world average. Okay, sorry about that. Although the 59 countries, they have very small emissions by each, their collective emissions are very considerable, 60% larger than India in 2018. The 59 emerging emitters include Laos, Ethiopia, Uganda, and other countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Then, why did their emissions grow so fast? Thus, we did an analysis on the trends and the drivers of the emission surge in each of the 59. We see that the population and economic growth and the increasing fossil fuel use are the major drivers of the emission surge. With the driving factors of their emissions, the fast-growing trend will unlikely change in the next decade for the emerging emitters. So we may wonder how much more carbon dioxide will they discharge in the future. We projected the emissions under some long-term energy scenarios. Total emissions from these emerging emitters reach 2 gigatons by 2040. Even in the most ambitious scenarios, therefore, the future emissions of the emerging emitters will substantially greater than the emissions that can limit global warming to 2 degrees Celsius. So to reach the 2-degree target, the emerging emitters and other countries should work together. If the emerging emitters continue growing at the current speed, like shown in this figure, other countries in the world, they need to reduce their emissions by 8.3% each year over 2020 to 2040, which is a very difficult task to any of the other countries. Therefore, we see the critical importance of mitigation efforts in the emerging emitters. Since the emerging emitters confront the grand challenge of reducing poverty and other sustainable development goals, it is necessary for the more advanced countries to transfer low carbon technology and provide continuous economic support to avoid the potential emissions from these emerging emitters. Also, historically high emitting countries, they must peak their emissions soon and save the carbon budget for the emerging emitters. So thanks for your listening.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your ideas with us. And our next speaker will be Martin Robbie, and let's hear what he wants to say to us. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, my name is Martin Robbie, and today I will be presenting the case of the adoption of a CO2 tax in Argentina that is part of my PhD research on carbon pricing in South America. According to international experience on carbon pricing, if these policies are not designed cautiously, can affect competitiveness, cost of living, loss of employment, among other negative externalities. Since this is particularly risky for jurisdictions with inequality and challenging economic circumstances, this research aims at identifying and analyzing the causal mechanism that influence the adoption of a CO2 tax in Argentina. In this endeavor, the study considers domestic and external processes. In order to better characterize this, I rely on 3 literatures: the multiple streams framework and the advocacy coalition framework for studying the domestic processes, and the policy diffusion and transfer studies for the external processes. The main method is explain outcome process tracing that attempts to craft a minimally sufficient explanation of a puzzling outcome in a particular case. Now I will introduce the key findings of the study. The main problem can be traced down to a negative feedback effect from a weak design of the ad valorem fuel taxes, which were vulnerable to shocks from changes in international fuel prices. In this line, a lump sum CO2 tax was identified as a potential solution, thanks to policymakers' previous knowledge about the benefits of carbon taxation and facilitated by the opening of a window of opportunity like a broader tax reform. Within the domestic process, it can be identified the use of strategies by policymakers. For instance, communicating the co-benefits of the CO2 tax to help outweigh its perceived costs, or limiting socialization of the early draft to avoid contestation from interest groups. Nonetheless, the lack of a high-level political ownership of the process and contestation activities from members of Congress, interest groups, and even factions inside the ruling party substantially weakened the original proposal. It is worth noting that a negotiated agreement between the Ministries of Energy and Economy was pivotal for even considering the proposal in the first place. The only condition that the Minister of Energy had was the gradual inclusion of natural gas starting in 2020 after the gas subsidies were phased out. Regarding the external processes, the government perceived that carbon taxation was a way of positioning the country internationally. For many stakeholders, pursuing a carbon tax was consistent with a country seeking to access the OECD. This paper has shown that carbon taxation is a fungible solution that can contribute to climate change, mitigation of commitments, or even improving complex fuel tax schemes. Moving forward, having a consensus on the decarbonization pathway of the country and the explicit role of carbon pricing in this target might contribute to neutralizing resistance from interest groups and other stakeholders. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to further discussing with you.
Thank you, Martin, for your inspiring speech. And I think now Huiwen has already fixed his technical problems, and now we invite Liu Huiwen back to our floor. Huiwen, you may now start your speech.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the technical issue before. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Huiwen Liu from Shanghai Jiao Tong University.